This is one of my favorite parts of the service, the wisdom story. And I have a story this morning about a town. Oh, you know, sorry, there's just something that's really bothering me. Beth, could you come up here for a second? Could you just take this? Thanks. So, um, Beth and I had a little argument a couple days ago, and it's just really sitting with me, and it's distracting me, and I'm having a hard time being present, and I really want to be present to all of you as we do the wisdom story. So, I just hope we can find some forgiveness process here, yeah? And so, the argument, right, was about ice cream and pizza. Beth, for some reason, seems to think that ice cream is better than pizza. Well. Hold on. Okay. Yeah, okay. I'm not asking for a survey. Just trying to have a moment here with my coworker. But clearly pizza is better. Just saying. And so I would just hope, Beth, if you could apologize, then, yeah. Because it was a little tense and, heated, and I'm feeling unsettled. If you could apologize, then I can forgive you, and then I can move on with the story. And now, I see you don't have a microphone. That's not by design. And so if you could just let go of the rope, then that'll be the sign that you're saying, I'm sorry, and then I can forgive you, and we can move on. Okay, so let go of the rope. But you're supposed to be apologizing for letting go of the rope. Oh, man. But so, I know my spouse Elizabeth told me I should probably just let this go because it's not that big a deal, but I'm feeling a little anxious. So, just would you apologize by letting go of the rope, please? Oh, man. Okay. Well, I guess I'll just have to. I don't. Okay. I'll just try and tell the story as is. I guess I'll do my best. So, there's the story of the town of Grudgeville, right? It was known for its grudges, and so it's they had a hard time, right? They were struggling with grudges. That's why it was called Grudgeville. It used to be a tourist destination for some reason that I can't understand. They used to be proud of their grudges. But anyway, there was this traveler that came through one day. As it so happened, she was a wise old woman. That's how these stories tend to go with wise people. She was traveling through town, and she saw all these people who were all holding grudges. It was like they were weighed down. They had they were showing up on their backs. It felt dreary and heavy. And she was talking to one of the people in the town, and they said, "Oh yeah, we carry our grudges for generations. I'm still mad at the principal of the school because his grandfather told my grandfather that he looked ugly. It was just we carry all this stuff." And the wise traveler said, I have 5 magic words that I think could help you with this. And the person who's just said, "Oh, that's great. Let me get everybody together. We are so tired of carrying our grudges. Let's do this." And so the whole town gathered together, and the wise woman stood up and said, "Here are the 5 words that will help you. You need to all say them to each other. If you say, 'I'm sorry,' and 'I forgive you.'" And the people were like, "What? You want us to say that? Really?" And the wise woman said, "Yes, that's actually what, if you want to have to let go of your grudges, this is what's going to have to happen." And so the people, they weren't excited about this, and it was a little hard, but they all said out loud to each other, "I'm sorry, and I forgive you." And slowly their grudges disappeared, and they stopped having to be carrying the weight of them. They lifted their backs up straight, and their lives became much, much better as they forgave. And so that's the story this morning. It's the story of the town of Grudgeville. And now, that means it's not in your order of service. We left that out by accident. Oops, I hope you can forgive us. But we left out the singing of the children out. And so we're going to do that now. And first we are going to sing one verse of "Let Us Open Our Eyes." Then I'll give some instructions. Then we'll sing one more verse as the kids are exiting. So let us sing, let us open our eyes. Today, our Crossing Paths group of 6th, 7th, and 8th graders is visiting Tricon, our neighboring congregational church. Middle Owl, our comprehensive sexuality program for 5th graders, is meeting in the chapel. Little RE for preschool and kindergarten is in the Mildam, there we go, I can read, Mildam Nursery School. Caregivers with young children are welcome to bring them down now if you have not already. And now I would like to invite our 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th graders to meet your RE teachers to explore winter holidays together. As they head up to the Emerson room, let's join together in song. So, Beth, I need to do the reading. So, will you let go of the rope, please? But it's my rope. So, will you let go, please? Do you guys have any ideas how I can get up in the pulpit? Beth won't let go of the rope. 5 words? You want... I'm not so sure about that. Any other ideas? I don't like the 5 words idea. Any other ideas? You want me to let go of the rope? But you didn't hear what she said. You want me to let go of the rope? Okay, fine. I'll answer. Someone asked if I feel better. I'm not sure if I do yet. I'll think about that. Our reading this morning is number 602 in the Gray Hymnal, If There Is to Be Peace, by Lao Tse. If there is to be peace in the world, there must be peace in the nations. If there is to be peace in the nations, there must be peace in the cities. If there is to be peace in the cities, there must be peace between neighbors. If there is to be peace between neighbors, there must be peace in the home. If there is to be peace in the home, there must be peace in the heart. Here ends our reading. I'm not speaking to you until you say you're sorry for pulling my hair. Those words haven't actually been uttered in my 4-kid household yet, but they might well be someday. What happens, though, if the hair puller refuses to say sorry? Does that mean that the one whose hair got pulled is stuck being upset forever and ever? That sounds silly, right? That a pair of siblings would never talk again if one of them didn't apologize. But that's actually often how we respond when someone has hurt us, and we don't even realize how it's trapping us. Desmond Tutu calls the traditional Western kind of forgiveness conditional forgiveness. It is forgiveness based on certain conditions we set being met. If you say sorry, if you apologize profusely, if you tell me you love me, if you let go of the rope, then I'll forgive you. In his book written with his daughter Info, titled The Book of Forgiveness, Tutu writes of conditional forgiveness. Without forgiveness, we remain tethered to the person who harmed us. We are bound with chains of bitterness, tied together, trapped. Until we can forgive the person who harmed us, that person will hold the keys to our happiness. That person will be our jailer. When we forgive, we take back control of our own fate and feelings. We don't forgive to help the other person. We forgive for ourselves. We forgive for ourselves because forgiveness isn't actually dependent on or even really about the other person. We forgive for ourselves because forgiveness is more about the process of healing the hurt within us than it is about rebuilding the relationship. Now, often, with people we care about, the two processes go hand in hand. We heal the hurt as we rebuild the relationship. But they're actually two distinct things. I'm guessing most of us have experienced at one time or another where someone said they forgave us, or we said we forgave someone else, in an attempt to rebuild the relationship. But they or we hadn't actually forgiven. And when that happens, the relationship usually ends up being strained or disconnected in some ways or some moments. Because forgiveness isn't about rebuilding relationship. It's about the internal release. Here's an example from my own life. And this one is real, unlike the pizza ice cream fight. When I was in 7th grade, I showed up at my music class one day, and the teacher, Mr. Richter, began class by sharing a story of something really funny he'd heard on TV the night before, and it happened to have been on an episode of The Golden Girls. And it just so happened that I had also seen that episode of The Golden Girls. And so when he was trying to explain and was struggling, he asked if anyone knew the story, right? So the story was one of the Golden Girls was talking to a teenager, and the teenager was explaining the difference between a dork and a geek. And so when Mr. Richter said, "Does anybody know what I'm talking about?" I was like, "Oh, I do. And so I explained to repeat almost verbatim this conversation between the Golden Girl and the teenager, explaining the difference between a dork and a geek. And then when I was done, Mr. Richter said, "Well, thank you, Seth. The reason I was bringing it up to share today was when I was watching it, I was thinking of you." Yeah, so we heard some laughter, right? But and that's a normal reaction. No judgment, but like actually that really hurt, right? That was uncomfortable laughter because it hurt a lot. And I've been carrying that around, the pain and the hurt of that experience, for a long time. Now, has that pain and hurt that I've been carrying around, has it been hurting Mr. Richter? Not at all. Has it been hurting me? You bet it has. In fact, the only person my anger and resentment has been hurting is me. According to Dr. Fred Luskin, director of the Stanford University Forgiveness Project, I constructed what he calls a grievance story, which is where you tell yourself and others a victim story over and over again. The problem with grievance stories is that they do not accomplish anything. Instead, they leave us stewing in our own hurt and pain. There is definitely a natural and healthy grieving process that we go through when we're wronged. We're usually angry and hurt, we rehearse the narrative in our minds, and we share the painful story with others. If we become bogged down in the story, though, and continually revisit the pain, we don't move forward. And that's what happened with me and Mr. Richter. I held on to that story of what he did for, it was decades, right? So in my 20s, I would every so often, for whatever reason, this would pop up into my head, and I would sit there and I would be angry and upset and say, how dare he do that to someone who he was supposed to be helping? I want to track him down. I want to track him down and find him and tell him what he did was wrong. So there I was in my grievance story. I'm not the only one, right? I spoke with a woman once who shared with me each major grievance she ever experienced. Or at least that's what it seemed like. It was actually pretty remarkable to listen to, right? She started in kindergarten with a teacher who corrected her unfairly for knocking over a glass of water that someone else spilled. Moved on to first grade where a teacher had thrown an eraser at her. Then second grade, and just right on up, it kept on going. So this woman, like I have been with Mr. Richter, this woman was stuck in pain, hurt, and resentment. In fact, the word resentment comes from the root word ressentir, meaning to feel again. And this is exactly what this woman was doing, reliving those experiences with me, and I'm guessing she did it with others too. She kept feeling the same pain, decades-old pain, over and over and over again. I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty terrible to me, reliving the feelings of pain and hurt over and over without an end in sight. I mean, if I asked, would you like some pain, anger, and resentment to store in your body and stew over for the next 10 years? Is there anybody here or anyone else who's jumping up and down and saying, oh yes, please, that sounds great, me? Anybody? Not so much, right? And yet this is exactly what we do when we hold on to and live in our grievance stories. We give our personal power over to the individual who hurt us. We let their past actions dominate our present experience. Now this morning in my little argument with Beth, there was only one rope. But imagine if there was a rope tying us to the people and experiences that have hurt us for every grudge that we might be carrying. It's a little bit of a different kind of interdependent web, eh? If there was a rope for every grudge we were carrying, life might start to look awfully like the life of the people from our story in Grudgeville. We might not even be consciously aware of the ropes that bind us in most moments. But if we have not forgiven, if we're still carrying those grudges, holding on tight, those invisible ropes still bind us. They still restrict us. They still hold us back from moving forward. Are you or someone you know currently living in Grudgeville? And if so, how is that working out for you? Choosing forgiveness is choosing to let go of the rope over and over again. The rope may be wound really tight around us. There may be some knots that are difficult to get out, knots that take some time to work through. But as we begin to heal, the knots will come out and the ropes will fall away. We may never be free entirely, but every time we choose the path of forgiveness and healing and let go of one more of those grievance story ropes that's holding us back, there becomes greater peace in our hearts. Now, making that choice can be hard. It is often easier, as Bishop Tutu notes, to reject our pain and deny our grief, and then either dream of revenge, as I did, or actually try to take revenge in the real world. Others of us hold on to the grudge because we think it will help keep us safe. The tighter we hold, our subconscious thinking goes, the more vigilant we'll remember to be so that we can avoid getting hurt like that again the next time. If only life worked that way. Rejecting our pain and denying our grief does not make those feelings go away. Holding on to our grudge and not forgiving does not actually keep us safe. Saying the words, "I forgive you," if you haven't told your story, if you haven't named the hurt, that simply leads to what Tutu calls a thin veneer of peace. Nominally, the relationship is restored. We can say everything's okay, but the reality is, if we haven't actually forgiven, everything's not okay. The anger and resentment will stay between you and the person you've supposedly forgiven, a barrier to connection and happiness. Now, it's true for smaller things, sometimes forgiving as simple as just letting go of the rope. I forgive you, Beth. But sometimes it's a lot more challenging than that. So, how do we go about trying to forgive, especially when it's hard? Well, there are many paths to forgiveness out there, some of them very well researched. I'm actually a pretty big fan of the one Desmond Tutu and his daughter suggest in their book. The Tutus recommend 4 steps. One is telling the story. Second is naming the hurt. Third is granting forgiveness. And the fourth is renewing or releasing the relationship. So the first one, telling the story, is about sharing your negative experience with others in a meaningful way. Now, there's always the danger, of course, of falling into a grievance story, of reliving the pain, hurt, and resentment over and over. Then the story becomes a rope, a bond, a prison, a grudge. But it is important to share our stories of difficulties with people we trust, to let them hear us, be with us, and help us make meaning. This is why telling the stories of apartheid was such an important part of the truth and reconciliation process that Bishop Tutu oversaw in South Africa. Step 2 is naming the hurt. And this is about more than just telling the story. It's also about naming and being with the feelings. Now, I have to admit, I didn't get this step at first. What is the difference between telling the story and naming the hurt? It wasn't clear. But as I was reading the Tutu's book and reflecting on my experience with Mr. Richter, something clicked. And I realized that as often as I had told the story over the years, I had never actually named the feelings that came up for me in that moment and its aftermath. Of course, I didn't have the tools and emotional self-awareness necessary to name the feelings back then when I was 12. But I have them now. And for all the time I've spent on that grievance story, and I've spent more than I'd like to admit, for all the time I've spent, I never actually managed to name the feelings I was having. As a kid, I just knew I felt terrible, but now I can name the feelings. I felt shame. I am wrong and bad as a human being because this teacher, the adult who was supposed to protect me from the bullies, he bullied me himself. I felt shame. I helped him, unknowingly, but I helped him bully me. I told the story he used to make fun of me. How could I have been so stupid? I felt shame. I must be just as awful as he and everyone else, all the kids who tease me. I must be just as awful as they think I am. Those were the feelings I had at the time, and clearly the ones I carried for me for much longer than I would have wished. And I have to say, I wish I had read the Tutu's book sooner because that act of naming was really helpful. Naming the hurt did indeed help me find some greater measure of forgiveness. Naming those feelings helped me change the story I've been telling myself subconsciously, even as I repeated the facts of the event and knew better as an adult. Naming the hurt helped me begin to ease my grip on the rope that I'd been holding so tightly to for over 20 years. Now, to be clear, forgiving does not mean accepting what the other person did was okay. What Mr. Richter did to me, not okay. It does mean making the choice to feel and then let go of the pain, the hurt, the resentment, the bitterness, and the shame. It means choosing to move into the future. The third step, granting forgiveness, is where we truly, honestly, and genuinely forgive. If you're struggling with granting forgiveness, even after the first two steps, Tutu recommends reflecting on our shared humanity and working to find compassion for all our siblings, even those who have harmed us. But all the shared humanity and compassion in the world won't help you forgive if you're stuck in your grievance story, if you're stuck in anger and resentment. Step 4, renewing or releasing the relationship. This is where we return to what we consider the norm in Western society. Once we have gone through our process of healing and forgiveness, we can then choose to renew or release the relationship. With loved ones, with friends and family, we often choose to renew the relationship. This is made much easier, of course, if they are apologetic, if they are partners in the healing process. We may sometimes choose to renew the relationship even if the other person is not a partner in the process, though. And sometimes we might choose to release the relationship. Now, with strangers or acquaintances, this is usually not so hard. Releasing, letting go of someone we care about deeply, though, that can be a very painful choice if we make it. Sometimes it is a necessary choice, though, for the good of ourselves and our lives. If a person not only does not apologize, but also repeats the harmful behavior, sometimes releasing the relationship is the only option we have, even if we have found forgiveness. My good friends, if there's to be forgiveness in the world, there must be forgiveness in the nations. If there's to be forgiveness in the nations, there must be forgiveness in the cities. If there's to be forgiveness in the cities, there must be forgiveness between neighbors. If there's to be forgiveness between neighbors, there must be forgiveness in the home. And if there's to be forgiveness in the home, there must be forgiveness in the heart. I encourage you this morning not to let other people's past actions dominate your present experience. I encourage you to choose to forgive. You don't want to live in Grudgeville, I promise. Let go of the rope, tell your story, name the hurt, grant forgiveness, renew or release the relationship. Find forgiveness, choose forgiveness, so that you might find peace in your heart.